no, I completely messed things up. I've literally been talking for half an hour and I was just like, nobody's talking in the chat, but that's okay. Okay, well, that's my fault. I can blame eclipse season, but I just didn't click the right button. So, hi to whoever is here. I'm so sorry. Let me know if y'all can hear me now, and I'll just start over. Oh no, this is terrible. I'm so sorry, and I'm so glad that you said something, Saturn. I am so sorry, guys. So, should I just start from the beginning? I just talked a ton. Oh my God, terrible, terrible. I just didn't click the right button. I'm so sorry. Okay. Let me recenter myself here. I really apologize. Well, it's been a week. It's been a wild eclipse season week. I guess I'll just start over. That's okay. It's good for me to talk stuff out loud. It'll be good that I did a dress rehearsal for myself. All right, welcome. Welcome to Collapse Times. We are here now. We are just 40 minutes late. That's how it is sometimes. Today, we're going to talk about Charlie Kirk's assassination. We're going to talk about the UAP congressional hearing that took place on September 9th, last Tuesday. And we're going to talk about Jeffrey Epstein and his birthday book and his birth certificate and the astrology world being abuzz about this new revelation about his birth time. And I'm going to tell you kind of my story and my saga around all of that. And then after this public live, I'm going to go live for members only. I'm going to put the tinfoil hat on, and I'm going to go deeper into some of my own theories about what is happening in the world today. So, real quick, we'll check in with the cards from last week. We drew the antimony card and the gnosis card. The antimony card is about a creative, kind of fierce energy that needs to be channeled well, or else it can become corrosive. The gnosis card is about knowledge and awareness and truths that don't come from external input or studying. They come from kind of an arising in oneself. And I now am posting the pictures of the descriptions of these cards, so you can find those on the community posts if you want to go deeper with these. As usual, I'm not feeling any super direct links between what happened collectively and these cards, but the antimony card did make me think about a little bit about the public reaction to Charlie Kirk's death and just, all of the controversy, all the discourse that's flying around regarding that. But particularly, it just made me think about how strange it is, this world that we live in, the social media world, where everybody feels compelled to share their opinions publicly, and how easily corrosive that energy, that habit, the space of being in social media can become. It's one thing to have your internal reaction to Charlie Kirk's death. It's one thing to share, your feeling, your reaction to people that you're close to, around you. And it's just a different thing to put it out online. And it's not that I think there's anything wrong with that necessarily, but it's just a different like state of the world that we live in, where people feel so compelled to, need to react to everything that happens in real time, and need to put out a hot take, and need to let the world know how they feel. And I just feel like that's if we're not conscious of the fact that like we don't have to do that, the need to do that, and then also just being in the space where you're reading everybody else's reactions, all of that I feel like can become corrosive to the soul. So as always, I love to hear y'all's reflections on these cards. If there's anything you want to share, if they feel relevant to anything that came through for you this week. Also, I do think the Gnosis card, it's very Mercury Cazimi vibes, which we are just emerging from. And yeah, let's use that as a transition into the current astrology. So, folks, Kali, sorry, I'm not saying your username right, but for some reason it's hard to find the link. It's under the normal videos, but it doesn't show up in the live videos, but you should see it in the description of this video. If you just look in the description box, there should be a link that says join the channel membership here. And if not, you can definitely find it like in the description box under one of my regular videos. Okay, so I had already talked all about Charlie Kirk, but let's go back to that in a minute, and let's just look at the current transits right now. So we'll just check in with the astrology of the moment. We are in the middle of eclipse season, as I'm sure everybody knows. We're just emerging from Mercury Cazimi. Mercury and the Sun were exactly conjunct last week. We talked last week about Saturn moving back into Pisces, but just to name that again, like I'm feeling this energy pretty strongly. It's a pretty heavy, hazy, sleepy, foggy kind of an energy. It has really made it challenging to keep up with the good new habits that I had created while Saturn was in Aries. So I don't know if anybody else is feeling that, but I know I've talked to multiple people that are feeling that haziness and that heaviness and that kind of leakiness of energy. And I really feel like that corresponds to Saturn just kind of jumping back, plopping back into the big ol' ocean of Pisces. And the eclipse that's coming up next Sunday is going to be directly opposite Saturn. So this energy is going to keep on being a theme. But also hopefully at the Mercury Cazimi over the past few days, you got some kind of clarity. And, this all of it, including the South Node in such close proximity, really resonates with the release of the Epstein birthday book, this kind of burst of information coming out. And yeah, like I said, I feel like it connects to the Gnosis card. So hopefully that manifested for some of us on a positive level of some kind of clarity coming maybe not from externally, but from within. And also in this moment, let's see, we've got the moon in an exact square to Saturn and Neptune right now. So that's also kind of a moment of tension and probably a really good time to talk things through. And that makes me laugh because I've just been talking to myself for 40 minutes with the moon in Gemini. But yeah, this is a good alignment to just get it out through talking. So if there's emotions that you need to process, if you have somebody to be your sounding board, that's great. It also maybe is a good time to just like talk to yourself in the mirror or while you're taking a walk or while you're driving or whatever. We've also got Mars opposite Chiron right now. And I think last week I talked about kind of the woundy aspects of that, which obviously any Chiron aspect does tend to sometimes feel like a wound or activate a wound. But also this might be a healing experience for you. Chiron aspects, ultimately, they are bringing something that is below the surface of consciousness up to the surface of consciousness to be integrated and healed in that way. And this could be interesting if you know your chart to look to the Aries Libra axis in your chart. Chiron has been in Aries for a long time, all the way since 2018. So you could, see if there's anything you can track with that around your own sense of identity or personal power or your survival instinct. And Mars might be kind of highlighting that right now. So with this alignment and with this Aries Libra axis in general, we're working with straddling the kind of singularity and individuality of Aries and the Libra energy that is much more relational and likes to merge and cares a lot more about harmony and balance. And especially Mars being in Libra for about the past month, there's going to be some lessons about playing well with others and finding, how to create balance in your all kinds of different situations, but especially maybe working situations or situations where you're using that Mars energy. You've got a goal, you're trying to get somewhere, but with Mars in Libra, you're not going to get where you're trying to go if it's only you. You're going to have to invite others in. It's going to have to be relational. So over the next couple days, that will come to a peak. And yeah, that just might be something interesting to track in your own chart. Jupiter also is a part of that alignment. And hopefully Jupiter is just bringing in some empathy and compassion and overall supportive vibes from Cancer to any situation with this Mars Chiron opposition that might feel kind of tense, because oppositions are always a bit of a tug of war. Okay, I think that's it for the astrology of the moment. And yeah, just hold out until the eclipse is over next week. I find the energy of eclipse season, like between the two eclipses, to be pretty challenging. I usually feel pretty ungrounded. Even without Saturn dropping back into Pisces, I usually just feel like it's really hard to be rooted during eclipse season. And ultimately, maybe that's because the energies need to be kind of thrown up into the air and the balls need to fall down where they may, or where the universe or the karmic forces of eclipse season are directing them. But during that time that everything is just kind of unmoored, it can be pretty uncomfortable. So breathe through as much as you can, lean into these Virgo energies, especially for our Virgo eclipse coming up. So maybe lean into nature, anything related to the earth, maybe lean into something intellectual, some kind of learning, or, having kind of a high standard for yourself in terms of what you accept as truth. Virgo is very good at critical thinking. It's very good at analysis. It's very good at being meticulous in its research and its study and its understanding of things. So, and especially because Mercury is hanging out right here as well, I think that's kind of the way to ride out the rest of this eclipse season. All right. So now we can get to Charlie Kirk. I'm going to talk mostly about the event chart for the shooting. I will bring his natal chart in a little bit. There's no birth time for his natal chart, so we can't really do like a full analysis, but it definitely has some very direct overlaps with this event chart. So when I'm looking at an event chart, I always look at the rising sign, so the ascendant, and the midheaven first, and that will give you a lot of information about the overall qualities of the event. So we have a Scorpio rising and a Virgo midheaven. And Scorpio rising, pretty obviously a pretty dark, deathy event. There's also some behind the scenes, secret ass shit going on, pretty scorpionic there too. And then the Virgo midheaven tells me that this was something meticulously planned. So there is some fire in the chart. We have the moon conjunct Chiron in Aries. We have Venus in Leo, but I feel like the fact that there's no fire on the ascendant or the midheaven. The ruler of the chart is Mars. That's also not in a fire sign. The sun is not in a fire sign. I feel like there is not a lot that would indicate that this was, some act of passion or something that arose out of a burst of emotion and was spontaneous. It really looks like something that was planned ahead of time and had a lot of kind of intricate coordination. Now, one thing that I find really interesting about this chart is that there is nothing in the 12th or in the 8th. There is one of the Liliths, and I am not an expert on Lilith, and I forget which one I have set up here, but one of the Liliths is conjunct Mars, and she is technically in the 12th house. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. But aside from that, even, I don't work with too many points, but the asteroids, the centaurs, and all the main planets that I work with, there are none of them in the 12th through the 8th. And usually when you have an event where there's a lot of secrecy and there's a lot of, where the outward impression of the event is very, very different from what is behind the scenes, you have planets in the 12th through the 8th. For example, Jeffrey Epstein's death chart has a lot of planets in the 12th. So it's interesting to me that that's not the case here. And I guess the way that I read that is that whatever the, reality of it is, whoever the shooter really is, and however he was brought into that position, whatever message was trying to be sent is actually pretty overt and pretty direct. And so my deeper theory about what this message might be, I'm going to get into in the tinfoil hat session. The two theories that are circulating, one is that it was a Mossad hit. The other is that the killer is a groyper. And the groyper theory, so I honestly, both of those theories would make sense without there being anything in the 12th or the 8th. Groyper theory, you can look into that more, but basically the groypers are like Nick Fuentes' army who think Charlie Kirk is not far right enough, and they're kind of like in a war with him, and there were a bunch of groyper memes written on like the bullet casings. So that's one theory that doesn't seem impossible to me. I did see the videos of the guys making the weird hand signals behind him. There's some stuff about the plane that took off from Provo Airport and turned its radar off, like right after it took off. If it was a Mossad hit, the theory is that recently Charlie Kirk started saying things about Israel that weren't 100,000% positive or whatever. And I don't know how much I resonate with that theory, because why do they not go after Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens or one of these, just as prominent, if not more prominent right-wing figures who are saying way more directly negative things about Israel? I don't know what to make of that. However, if it was a Mossad hit, anytime there's an assassination like the OpenAI whistleblower or the Boeing whistleblowers who were killed, it's only like a small fraction of the intention of that is to shut that person up, right? The larger intention is to warn other people who might be thinking of speaking up. So that could also make sense, because if it were a Mossad hit, the people that are supposed to get that message would be getting it. It wouldn't really be hidden. Okay, let's get into a couple of the specifics here. I have a third theory that I'll get into in the tinfoil hat session that is also not I'm not convinced of anything. I don't have anything fully fleshed out, but yeah, we'll talk about that a little more later. So a couple of things that jump out about this chart. Mercury, Sun conjunct South Node in the 10th. The Sun in general in event chart is going to be kind of the principal figure, the person that the event maybe is revolving around. It resonates to have the Sun conjunct to the South Node in the 10th house, a very public position at the time that somebody is killed, somebody checks out, goes to the other realms. Mercury up here also resonates on a surface level. This just resonates with there being a lot of press at the event, with it being very visible in general. This also could speak to these guys doing the hand signals behind him, like, super close to the Sun, and all this Virgo energy that indicates some kind of meticulous planning. So I'll show you, I'll come back to this in a second, but just so you can see, Charlie's Sun is conjunct Jupiter in Libra, conjunct Mars of this chart. So Mars is the ruler of this chart, and that also aligns pretty directly. I feel like Mars probably represents the killer himself. And that aligns just with Kirk's Sun, just again kind of taking him out. And then you have this direct opposition to the Moon conjunct Chiron in Aries, and typically the Moon in a mundane chart represents the public, kind of the mood or the temperament of the public. So you could read this as related to the public at large and everybody's reaction, but also I think this just maps to the public at the event, who were scared, who were wounded, who were in a very Aries emergency survival kind of state of mind as they directly witnessed this guy die in front of them. Jupiter is squaring Mars and kind of more loosely squaring Chiron and the Moon. Venus is here in the 9th house too. It did take place at a university, so you have that 9th house theme. That especially might be what Jupiter is speaking to here. You have the Pluto squaring the Moon at this moment, which I don't have any theory about what Pluto's representing down here in the 3rd house. There's a lot of layers. There could be a lot of layers regarding communication and technology and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, just Pluto squaring the Moon is a pretty dark, intense moment, which makes sense. And Uranus had just stationed retrograde, and for some reason that also feels significant. I'm not exactly sure why, but if we look at Charlie's chart, so there's no birth time for him, so we'll just look at his chart as it aligns with the event chart. So his South Node is in Gemini. Uranus was close to a conjunction with his South Node and had just stationed retrograde there. Some karmic activation, perhaps. I have this theory about all of the talking head types, podcast bro types that are around these days. I have this theory that America right now is playing out a lot of karma that is repeating from ancient Rome. And in Greece and then later in Rome, I think this was more of a Greece thing, but there's a lot of obviously interconnection there, which we see in astrology. There were these figures called the sophists or sophists. I'm not sure how you say it, but Sophist. And they were rhetoricists. So they were trained in rhetoric and they were trained in persuasion. And a lot of them would travel and they would take on students and they would teach them how to speak and storytell and persuade. And I think that all these guys like Joe Rogan, Ben Shapiro, all the millions of right-wing podcast bros especially are connected to that karma of sophistry or sophistry. And so Gemini South Node definitely speaks to someone who in their past lives had a lot of experience with words and language and storytelling and that kind of thing. So Uranus, maybe activating some of that karma. So yes, the Sun and Jupiter, Charlie's Sun-Jupiter conjunct the Mars here, just feels pretty directly aligned. Even though there are no 12th and 8th house planets in the event chart, his Scorpio, Mars, and Mercury are both in the 12th house here. And whether or not the 12th house is super significant, there's just another direct alignment here with his Scorpio stellium conjunct the ascendant of the event chart. And the other piece that I thought was interesting was his Chiron in Virgo at the top of the chart. And this just also is like a map or a mirror of what that event looked like, because Chiron in Virgo, like, this is a pseudo-intellectual. Like, this is someone who's trying really hard to be a teacher and a healer, like Chiron, and also an intellectual. Chiron in Virgo is going to want to teach and heal through knowledge and intellect, and obviously him and all the rest of them are these pseudo-intellectuals, so that's just like very public, just right at the top of that chart. And Chiron squares his nose, so again, like, yeah, South Node in Gemini, Chiron in Virgo, lots of Mercury energies there related to his karma and how he's playing it out in this lifetime. So that's all I've got here. I'll go deeper into my conspiracy theory on the members only live, but I welcome anyone else's theory, or if there's anything that I missed in the astrology, because I'm sure I did. I only kind of touched on the surface level of everything here. Oh, the other piece though, Lilith. I will say this publicly, but this is what I'll go more in depth about later. So, like I said, I'm not an expert on Lilith, and I even forget which Lilith I have it set up to be showing here. But what I am recalling is that during the Trump assassination attempt in Butler, one of the videos that was getting passed around in the few days after was this video of this woman who was sitting almost directly behind Trump, a little to the side, because you could see her in the video. And right as the like shots rang out, this woman smiled. She like smiled, and then she like ducked down with everyone. And Lilith in that chart, I forget exactly where it was, but it was very prominent. It was either at the top of the chart or at the very bottom of the chart, I think. And I believe that these guys who take these shots are not acting just of their own accord. I don't think in the situation with Charlie Kirk or the situation in Butler that the shooters just decided all on their own to do it. And why? What is the background? I'll say a little bit more about that later. But I think that they have handlers and they have people that are kind of convincing them to take these actions. And I think that women are involved who kind of seduce them. Maybe they don't actually have sex with them, but maybe they are the ones who are kind of on the front lines of like working these men up and convincing them to like be a hero or a savior or whatever it is by doing this radical action. So that's my thought on Lilith here. And maybe that also speaks to Venus and Leo up here. I'm not sure what this represents. A lot of times in a chart like this, you can find some, like in an event chart, you can find individual people that the personal planets represent. So usually, like I said, the sun is the main person that you're inquiring about or who is the center of the event. So in that case, it makes a lot of sense. Sun conjunct South Node, Sun is Charlie, Mars is the ruler of the chart, Mars is the shooter. I'm not sure who Venus is. Mercury, like I said, it could just be the press. Mercury aligns with the press, but it also could be those guys making the hand signals behind him. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. How's everybody doing? Everybody's hearing me okay now? I'm so sorry about that earlier. All right, let's keep going. So we're going to talk about the UAP hearing, and I don't really have a lot of astrology to talk about with this, but I just want to report on it. I pretty much decided that, especially around this subject, but my other conspiracy stuff too, publicly I'm going to report. So I'm going to break down the astrology when it's relevant, and I'm going to, especially with the UAP stuff, I'm just going to share what happened so that people who, don't want to take 2.5 hours or whatever to watch the video of this congressional hearing can keep up with it. And I'll give you my little takes on it. And then with the private live streams with the channel members is where I'm going to share my theories. So my own opinions and my own kind of unverified reads on what's going on behind the scenes with all of this. George Knapp is a national treasure. I agree 100%. Okay, so here's just a little summary of this UAP congressional hearing. It was on Tuesday, September 9th. I find it fascinating that these events even happen. This was not the first one. I think there's been like 3 or 4 over the past few years. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. And in the UAP world, people will talk about how they've been kind of disappointed with overall what has come out and what hasn't come out and who has been called to testify and who hasn't been called to testify. Like, it's been a lot less revelatory than people hoped, but people also will acknowledge that, like, it's pretty amazing that these hearings are even happening. And I find it really fascinating. And I know this is just kind of how Congress works, but I find it fascinating that, like, this took place and there's only like less than 10 members of Congress who are in there for the hearing. And I know they have other things to do or whatever, but like, you have these witnesses to these anomalous events who are very credible people testifying, and almost nobody in Congress is there to even hear what they have to say. So you had there the UAP task force, which I think is headed by Anna Paulina Luna. She's a representative from Florida. There's 2 other representatives, Burchett and Burleson. I didn't bother looking up their first names, but you hear about them a lot. They're kind of all over the podcast circuit. Jasmine Crockett was maybe the only Democrat that was there. There was a couple of others that maybe are not on the task force, but that also came. I think anyone who wants to come and can question if they like. So they get 5 minutes to ask questions each. And first, the people who are testifying do their opening statements. So the people who testified were 3 military people who had unexplained sightings of anomalous objects. And then one guy who is an expert on like whistleblower and whistleblower protections. And then George Knapp, who is this legendary journalist. He's been around for decades. He is very interestingly a place where I have found the rare overlap between my regular political deep state research and the UAP world, because George Knapp was originally in Las Vegas, like in the 70s, reporting on the syndicate and the mob that is very, intricately linked to the CIA and the rest of the deep state. But he kind of found his way into the UAP world. And so he was like, before the internet, he was one of the hosts on Coast to Coast, a like AM radio show that you could call in like in the middle of the night. And everybody, it had such a reputation for being loony people. But now it's, to me, like, it's so obvious that people were reporting like real, true sightings, like this whole time. Yeah, so the 3 military witnesses, I'm not sure if they count as whistleblowers, because I think there's a difference. I think a whistleblower is somebody who's like bringing forth hard evidence, and I don't think that any of them count as whistleblowers, but I could be wrong about that. But anyway, one of them had a sighting in 2003, one of them had a sighting in 2012, and one of them had a sighting in 2013 or 2023. So an interesting, like, pretty wide range of timing there. And also it was a first that one of the witnesses, Chief Alexander Wiggins, he is still serving. So his sighting took place just a couple years ago. He's in the Navy, and it's the first time that an active military person has testified. Everybody else has been retired from the military. They also showed a video I think it was from the same sighting that Chief Wiggins had in 2023, which was something that took place off the coast of Yemen. I don't know when in 2023 this was, but it was a video. You could easily look it up. It's kind of all over like YouTube and Twitter now, but a video of an anomalous object that was moving, and then it was hit by a U.S. Hellfire missile. Good old military names there. But it was hit by the missile, and it kind of broke off into a couple pieces, but it like continued on the same trajectory, which everybody was like, whoa, that's so crazy. And I guess it is pretty crazy that something wouldn't be completely blown up and destroyed by a Hellfire missile. And of course, these videos, if you're expecting something that's like out of a movie, like a super sharp video of a perfectly shaped like flying saucer or whatever, it doesn't look like that. It looks like something that could be created with AI like very easily. Not even like a good AI could do it. Black and white, it's kind of greeny, but they have ways of validating these things. Like they have ways of validating that this came from this ship off the coast of Yemen, that it's like actual, from the military's like recording gear. So it, they are real things. And I recommend watching this if you're interested. It's probably on C-SPAN. It's on the GOP Oversight YouTube channel. That's where I watched it. And like, if you're skeptical or if you're kind of new to this subject, just watch the video and like feel when these people talk and testify, like feel it in your body and watch their body language and see what your read is. Because to me, they seem very earnest and legitimate. And one of the guys you could tell was nervous AF. Tom Borland, I think was his name. And he was just sweating, and I just want to talk a little bit about, there's just multiple reasons to believe these people and to not just write it all off as a psyop. So sure, there's plenty of sightings that happen from non-military people, but most of the people, if not all, that have been called to testify in Congress have been in the military. And first of all, military people are pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I'm blanking on the word, but like they're deeply psychologically tested, thoroughly psychologically tested. The military tests for a lot of things, a lot of different qualities, and they look for different qualities in people, and they, orient them in different directions based on psychological qualities. So they do look for sadism, and they put those people into like special forces. And they do maybe look for people that are really good at lying, and they invite those people into like CIA or other kind of spooky stuff. But for the most part, these people that are in more classic, traditional military roles, they're psychologically tested and chosen for their roles because they are stable, because they are honest, because they are good at following directions, and they're not going to just go rogue in any way. So they're very like, before they get into these roles, they are already predetermined to like have characteristics that are going to make them unlikely to just make something up. And also, okay, so there's a ton of stigma, even still now in the military. Like, I think it's probably hard for most people watching this channel to even imagine, because our brains are just so far away from that kind of conditioning. But in the military, they are very programmed. There's a very rigid like ideology that they are conditioned into and choose to stick to around what their role is and where the hard limits of like what they believe are. So there's a ton of stigma. If you see something, you don't want to get labeled crazy, much less you don't want to lose your position, lose your chance for promotion, lose your clearances, etc. But even just on a basic level, you don't want the stigma. So that's one factor that is stopping people from telling the truth. Also, these are people that are programmed to follow orders, and the orders that they usually get after seeing these kind of things, or if they try to report them or like, you know, put the information up the chain or whatever, they usually get pretty clearly shut down, and they usually get pretty clear instructions to not tell anyone about what they saw and to just be quiet about it. And they're programmed to follow orders. That's part of the whole ideology of being in the military, is that you don't ask questions. You don't, you know, question your superiors. You just follow what you're told. So that's another layer where it's like not in their nature to come forward and to be subversive in this way. Also, for a lot of them, not all of them, but some of the people that come forward have been in secretive programs. So they have these clearances to have access to, you know, whatever kind of different military secret stuff. And a lot of them, even if they are retired from the military, they're still going to work in a field. They're going to work in the private sector in aerospace contracting or whatever. So they're going to work in these fields where they would need clearances to be able to get jobs, and making these kind of reports puts them at risk of losing their clearances. And then, you know, they're also used to a certain lifestyle in terms of the amount of money that they make, and just their whole identity is invested in like the military and America being the good guys and America not being, you know, liars and doing things the right way. And so these kind of sightings, like, and not only sightings, right? Some of them that have maybe seen some more advanced technology that is being kept secret, or they know other dark things about what goes on inside of these black budget special access programs. It challenges their identity very deeply, their sense of who they are and their sense of where they're going in their lives. And I also just think that, like, before I started researching this subject and like really tuning in more, my read was that like a lot of the people were grifters. And I still think there's some grifters. I still think there's some people that are just talking out their ass and like don't really have anything useful to say. I'll say Avi Loeb, I think, is one of them. I'm not into his vibe. But most of them that I used to read as grifters, I don't have that read anymore. And the reason that I had that before is because so many of them are like, you know, they're on all the podcasts and they write books, and there's a million, you know, programs on all the streaming services about UAPs. And, you know, it seems like they're just kind of grabbing at like wherever they can get money from it. And there's a lot of money in the UAP world. It's kind of a funny contrast with the deep politics world. Nobody can really make any money in that world. But in the UAP world, there's lots of money to go around, and there's lots of, you know, interest from Netflix and Hulu and, you know, whatever, like all of these different more mainstream ways for them to get their voices out there and also for them to get money. And, you know, but I think it's just important to understand that, like, they lose a lot of opportunities financially, and they lose access to a steady stream of income when they become whistleblowers. And I'm not justifying it necessarily, but you just have to understand that, like, they're used to that certain lifestyle, and they're used to moving in elite circles. And that's, I think, why they can come across as kind of like money hungry and grifty in that way. And they do have incentives to embellish, you could say, but I don't think any of these people that were testifying on Tuesday even have incentives to, like, embellish anything. And none of them read as that kind of character at all. They all read as very grounded and very sincere. And again, this one guy just seemed nervous AF, like didn't want to be there. That's what it seemed like. So yeah, just really interesting stuff. The one piece of astrology, I won't even bother bringing it up, but the one piece of astrology that was interesting is that in the United States natal chart, there's Neptune at 22 Virgo on the midheaven, which I think corresponds to UAPs and non-human intelligence in some way. I'm not really sure how it relates exactly in the US natal chart, but it was at the Neptune return in 1939 that a lot of these sightings started to happen right around that time. And then it was at the Neptune opposition in 2021. It started kind of in 2020 or 2017 was when the first New York Times article came out. But like during this time of the Neptune opposition, there's also been this big, shift in the conversation around UAPs. So I think that Neptune and Virgo, it relates to physics and the advanced technology aspects of the phenomenon also have a lot to do with physics. So I think there's something there. And so at the time of this hearing, we just looked at this other chart for Wednesday, and this was on Tuesday, but it was basically the same with the Sun, Mercury, and the South Node at 18 degrees of Virgo. So pretty much conjunct to that Neptune at 22 degrees of Virgo. So another kind of like sun shining on that subject matter, and then the South Node being like, and Mercury too, being this like release and opening up of information. So I thought that was interesting. So again, I recommend like go watch the video if you're interested and read the body language of these people and listen to their answers and watch the video and see what you think, make your own decisions about it. I will go deeper into this once I put the tinfoil hat on. And we will also look at Jacques Vallée's chart in the members only live stream. Jacques Vallée is another OG of the UAP worlds, and he has a fascinating chart. So more to come on that. But now we get to Epstein, and I don't have any notes for this, so we're just kind of gonna play around here. Let me make sure I've got everything set up. So I'll share my saga of this past week with y'all, and then we can get into the charts. And I'm honestly not 100% about the Leo rising chart. I think there's some strong arguments that could be made for the Capricorn rising chart. But so my saga is that I opened up the birthday book just to like take a look. Like I didn't expect there to be any astrologically relevant information in there, but I was scrolling through, and on page 6 there's a birth certificate. I'll go ahead and show. So here's the birth certificate. I flipped the contrast to try to make it a little more clear, but it didn't really work. this is the chart that's later on. I'll get to that in a second. But this is the birth certificate. It's super blurry. But I looked at it and I was pretty sure that it said 6:15. And I couldn't tell AM or PM. Or I wasn't even sure at first what this piece was. But then I opened my astrology app, and unfortunately this is not going to show for y'all, I don't think. I'm just going to double check, but I don't think it's going to. If I pull up my chart list here, yeah, that doesn't show up on here, unfortunately. So I can't show you, but I have these two two charts in my chart list called Jeffrey Epstein Guess, where I had played around a few months ago with trying to rectify his chart. And I had landed on two different ones. One was for 11:20 p.m. with Libra rising. And then the other one I had landed on is 6:20 p.m. So once I saw that, I was like, oh, dang, it's got to definitely be PM. I got it right. And then I put something on Instagram and blah, blah. And then somebody sent me a reel where another astrologer was talking about the chart as if it were AM. And she was also showing, this. So I hadn't scrolled that far in the birthday book. The birthday book's 200 something pages. Later on, further on past the birth certificate, is an actual page that shows an astrology reading that someone did for him. And actually, I'll just pull up that page here. Let's see. So anyone can look at this. If you didn't know, it comes up on the top of Google if you just search Jeffrey Epstein birthday book. And it's page 134 that has the chart. So this is, I don't think this is Ghislaine. I can't tell who this is. This is the person who submitted this particular page to the birthday book. And sorry. They said, I asked my house astrologer what to make of you, and she gave me some incomprehensible charts and some comprehensible words. You can read this on your own if you like. So it has this layout. It doesn't have a circular chart, but it has this layout of the chart. And so I saw that in the other astrologer's reel, and I didn't look closely at it, but I was like, oh shit, there's actually a chart, and this person's reading it at 6:15 a.m. So that chart that's later in the book must say it's 6:15 a.m. And so then I put a retraction up, and I was gonna try to get on here on this live and demonstrate what I wish other astrologers would do by taking accountability when I get something wrong. I was going to talk about that. Then I actually looked in the birthday book and saw that this chart doesn't even have a birth time. It's just a 12 p.m. chart. And so that means that whoever this is that was asking their house astrologer about Jeffrey's astrology just wasn't working with a birth time. And so now I am pretty much again convinced that the 6:15 p.m. chart is right. But I'm not 100% convinced, because I've been looking at transits and significant times in his life, and the other chart makes sense too. So let's just play around a little bit here. I'll give you my arguments for the 6:15 p.m. chart. So this chart makes Jeffrey a Leo rising, Pluto and Leo in the first house. That resonates a lot. Jupiter in Taurus on the midheaven, squaring the nodes, conjunct Nessus. That resonates a lot for a man who was known for wealth. the timing of the 6:15 p.m. chart has this tight T-square between the moon, Uranus, and Chiron. And 9:18 p.m., where does that come from? I don't think the birth certificate looks like that at all. 9. I don't think it's 9. That doesn't look like a 9. I don't know where they would get that. So yeah, this T-square makes a ton of sense to me. Some people were talking about this in the comments on my original Instagram post, that like Chiron in the 5th, this can speak to somebody whose like development is stunted in some way. And in, you know, some dark manifestations, this can speak to somebody who does not have a healthy relationship with children or their inner child. And having this squaring the moon in Aries, like that alignment makes a lot of sense. If you look at the birthday book, it is fucking disturbing. You know, you can look at it on your own. If you want to listen to True and On podcast recent episode, they just like read through the whole thing. But like this whole book is just full. There's the Donald Trump one, but the whole book is full. Here's some zebras fucking, here's some lions fucking, here's this cartoon that was going around of him grooming girls. You know, there's like 30 plus people that submitted their little happy birthday wishes to Epstein, and they're just all this like immature, gross ass sexuality. Like they're all super sexual and they're all like really immature. I'm trying to find the picture I had on the thumbnail for this live. There's like, I missed it somewhere, but there's like a bunch of pictures of him and his like college friends, like in their tighty whities here, whatever. Is that one Epstein? There's like a bunch of pictures of him in like these bikinis. That there's Epstein. Like very weird and dark and toxic stuff. Oh no, wait, sorry. Was I not showing you guys the book? I was scrolling through, but I had the wrong screen up. I'm so sorry. Let me do that again. Okay, let's see. Here's the Donald Trump thing. Here's the cartoon. Here's the zebras fucking and the lions fucking and a zebra with his huge dick out. It's just really weird, really dark shit. And so the 6:15 a.m. chart has Chiron on the ascendant, and that could also resonate. There's at least one thing. Here's the picture I was talking about in the underwear. It's just like a bunch of pictures of him in these like little bikini bottoms. So, yeah, and there's something somewhere that somebody wrote how he was like really awkward and shy as a kid, and then like got over that more as an adult. And I mean, that could make some sense for like Chiron on the ascendant. But anyway, back to this chart. So a couple other things that align just in the chart itself. Mars conjunct Venus in Pisces in the 8th. Juno is a part of that as well. Like that could definitely speak to his strange sexual proclivities and his lack of boundaries. And I mean, no matter where this is, it kind of speaks to that. Like Juno speaking to his weird relationship with Ghislaine. I think a strong argument for this chart is the fact that the death chart as well, the death chart has a Leo rising, So the death chart has Pluto, Jeffrey Epstein's Pluto, conjunct the ascendant, and conjunct Mars and Juno here in the death chart. And it puts the Jeffrey Epstein's south node, or sorry, this is Epstein's south node. It puts that conjunct these Leo placements, so all these 12th house placements in the death chart. Oh, it feels kind of overwhelming to go into all the different life events. So if we have this 6:15 p.m. chart for Epstein, the death chart has Uranus on the midheaven. The funny thing is, though, let me show you the other chart. So if we use an AM chart, we have Chiron on the ascendant. And so the ascendant doesn't just switch. It doesn't become like Aquarius rising, Leo on the midheaven. It changes the whole axis. But the midheaven and the IC do pretty much just flip-flop. So the angular transits that I researched, so I'll give you like the one example that I remember is that Jupiter was at 6 degrees of Scorpio at the time of his first arrest in 2005, like the end of 2005 into 2006. And that was one of the transits that I thought made a lot of sense when I was doing the original rectification, having Jupiter and Scorpio on the IC at the bottom of the chart, because, he got lucky in a Jupiterian kind of way. He got the sweetheart deal. He was just like on house arrest, and then he got to leave jail, every day to go to work. However, it would also make sense to have Scorpio on the midheaven and have Jupiter conjunct the midheaven at the time that was happening. So unless y'all have any specific questions, I was maybe going to like go into a bunch of the different life events and their transits, but it feels a little overwhelming. And because I fucking talked for 40 minutes not being live, my voice is going a little bit. But if you have any specific questions or takes in the chat, let me know. And I'm sure this won't be the last time that I talk about this. In the 6:15 a.m. chart, you don't have this tight T-square between the moon and Chiron and Uranus. The moon is at like 7 degrees of Aries. So I feel like the T-square makes a ton of sense for what we know about his personality. So that's kind of one light argument for this chart. And I mean, I think Jupiter and Taurus on the midheaven, he was known as being very wealthy. That this was not a secret, right? Scorpio, bottom of the chart, dark sexuality stuff. Like this is more of a secret, private place. But his public persona was wealthy. Nobody knows where his wealth came from. This kind of thing is how people would talk about him. Uranus in the 11th. That makes sense to me. I didn't really realize until looking at the birthday book how actually pretty tight of a crowd he had cultivated. Like he was really seeking out particular people for his blackmail. And the most intense period of the blackmail stuff was happening in the 90s into the early 2000s. I don't think that was really going on in the same way after his first arrest. I think that he still had access to the same trafficking superhighways that he had access to when he was more actively like cultivating relationships with people in order to blackmail them. But I don't think he was being used as like directly for that work by Mossad / the CIA, you know, in the late 2000s and 2010s. My read is that he had a sex addiction and kind of got high on his own supply, or just needed so many fresh girls. I hate to say it that way, but that's like when he and Ghislaine were just like, you know, finding girls at like high schools in Palm Beach or whatever. I don't think that's really the same as the situation where he was getting girls to like kind of join the family, like Virginia DeFrey, who was like flown all over the world. And like, if you look at the birthday book, there's a lot of, I think they're all kind of towards the end, but there's a lot of women who write about how like he, you know, took them all over the world and they met these famous people, and you know, he not to say that, you know, they were really autonomous or enjoying that process, but they're just like very open about those experiences in the book. And they like wrote these letters to him for his 50th birthday. But also, you know, if you read Whitney Webb's book, you get into a lot more of this, but like the girls that were American were only like a small fraction of the girls that were around. There's a lot of American witnesses that, you know, are American survivors of Jeffrey Epstein who will say that there were a lot of other girls like on the island who didn't speak English, and they would like make comments. Like there's some quote from him about like how they prefer like the girls that don't speak English because they're like don't cause trouble. So I think they got a lot of them from like Eastern European countries. And then, you know, there's some interesting links with Melania Trump there. So nobody's asking any questions, so I think I'm just gonna wrap this part up. But it's been a really interesting week in the astrology world with this new information coming out, and like I said, I'm not super solidly convinced either way, and I'm open to new evidence, and I will keep doing my research with the rectifications and tracking the main thing that you do when you're trying to figure out a person's birth time is you look at significant turning points in their lives, and you try to find the chart where angular transit, so especially like Uranus or Pluto transiting the IC, the midheaven, the ascendant, the descendant, like you try to find a chart where some of those transits of, especially I would say Uranus and Pluto are the ones where it's going to be the most like obvious transformations that happen in their lives, like at the time that those angles are getting transited. So I'll keep working on that. All right, y'all, let's finish here with a card pull and a quick little song, and then I will go live for members and we'll get a little bit deeper. Thank you so much to everyone who was patient and who like maybe sat around for 30 minutes waiting for me to start when I was just on here talking to myself. So as always, we're going to get an alchemy card and an archetype card as guidance for the week ahead. The second week of eclipse season, the first week was pretty intense. So what will the second week bring? Or more importantly, Spirit, what do we need to know? What's going to support us this week? Quicksilver. Oh, I'm so sorry, Mary. You said Charlie's birth time, not Jeffrey's. I just didn't look closely at your comment. Charlie's birth time. Okay. Yeah, I didn't find one listed for him online, and I didn't have the time to try to do any rectification for him, but I'll check that out at some point. Sorry for that. Okay, our archetype card is the Self. Keywords are slippery, mobile, Mercury. Part liquid and part metal, Quicksilver, also known as Mercury, is a mesmerizing material. Its gift is to slip between worlds. It cannot be pinned down or easily defined. Mercury came to symbolize the god Hermes and the great hermetic secrets of alchemy, always sliding away into secrecy just beyond the alchemist's grasp. It is said Mercury represents the transition between the physical and the unseen worlds, between life and death, between science and the esoteric. It's the metal of sacred thresholds. Shamanic practitioners of every tradition must acquire the ability to stand at the doorway between worlds. This is no small feat. The Mercury card indicates the querent has a particular gift for such a task. This is the work of the shaman, the teacher, sage, artist, and alchemist. Heed the call of Quicksilver. The sacred threshold requires your attendance. Okay, I'm not going to read the rest of what's on there, but I will post the image of the description so you can read all the little additional insights and ways to go deeper. The Self has keywords of the soul, the witness, the watcher. The Self is the prism that allows the spectrum of our personalities to radiate. It does not judge, prohibit, suppress, or oppress any of its parts, as it lovingly knows that all aspects have a time and a place and leads us to experience the full breadth of life's offerings. The Self is the central abiding container of awareness of the infinite universe of possibilities. When this card appears, it's a call to step back into witness consciousness, to observe yourself navigating the world. Ask yourself, am I the stew or am I the chef? In most situations, our ego draws us into the cauldron where we swirl, spin, and smolder in chaos. Yet the Self is a graceful culinary dancer, watching, waiting, observing as the spectrum of ingredients become the flavor of our life. Look in the mirror for 30 seconds or more. Attempt to see the you behind the you. Well, both of these cards feel like really great advice for eclipse season. Mercury being the ruler of the South Node right now, being conjunct to the Sun right now, being very involved. It'll be just a little bit into Libra by the time of the second eclipse next week, but still the ruler of the eclipse. So that's definitely very relevant. And then it's a solar eclipse, so we've got the Self there as well. So I think there's probably a lot of good direct advice for all of us as individuals there about this coming week and moving into the end of eclipse season. And I do also feel like there's maybe some reference to the UAP phenomenon, and it'll be interesting to see if there's any, more that is revealed during the rest of this eclipse season, because the phenomenon is very mercurial, and it many people describe the experience of you kind of think that you understand something and then you don't, it kind of slips away. People have experiences a lot of it being non-photogenic. I think that's a quote from Jacques Vallée, that the phenomenon is not photogenic. So like it's like disappears the instant you take out your phone, or it seems to like be sensitive. It knows when somebody's videotaping it or when somebody's like about to take a picture or whatever. Yeah, so there's maybe that layer of it too. And some of the people who kind of wax philosophical on the phenomena, I think this actually also comes directly from Jacques Vallée. They'll talk a lot about how what's most important is not like what it is and having that like intellectual grip on it. What's most important is how it affects you and the awakening that being exposed to the phenomenon causes in a person. So Quicksilver and the self. Yeah, we're gonna look at Jacques Vallée's chart in the tinfoil hat live stream, and it's a wild chart. That'll be interesting. All right, let me close out here with a song, and if you want to know all the deep conspiracy secrets, just become a channel member. It's only $2.99 a month. Members are gonna keep getting more from me. I am feeling extremely grateful for the people that are my channel members here, because when we interact on our live streams and stuff, it feels like y'all are really, really people that are on the same wavelength as me, and I feel really invited to be myself and to put more of my own kind of weird self and weird theories out. And I want to keep feeding that. I want to keep giving back to y'all and creating reciprocity. So I'm just, yeah, grateful for everyone who is a channel member, and you can expect lots more perks and benefits coming up. So I'm not going to play a new song tonight. I'm going to play Warrior's Lament, which is just a short little song that is not on the EP that I have been kind of slow dripping here. But this song I would love to release as a single before the EP. I think it would be a really easy song to produce and to record. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But this is Warrior's Lament.
This frozen heart is open now. The darkest night I ever witnessed was a starless sky and a broken vow. And though I tried to beg forgiveness, no sound would come from my open mouth. And in the end, I had to leave it. I couldn't pull the arrow out. If I told a lie and you believed it, as the years go by, may the truth come out. Ooh, this frozen heart is open now. As the years go by, truth come out. And as I lay there on the ground, always knew that time would come back around. Do you know what time it is? 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 Ooh, ooh.
All right, that is it for tonight, y'all. This was a long one, even if I hadn't talked for 40 minutes to myself at the beginning. But I hope you got something out of it. Let me know your thoughts and feedback anytime. And then for anyone who's jumping on the members only live stream, I did make a separate live stream on YouTube, so that should show up for you if you just go to your main page or my Collapse Astrology page, and I'll be right on there in just a minute.